In December of 1948, on a quiet stretch of beach near Adelaide, Australia, a man's body was found lying against a seawall. He was well-dressed, clean-shaven, and appeared peaceful, as if he were simply asleep. But when investigators arrived, they quickly realized there was nothing ordinary about this man or the mystery he would leave behind. No one knew who he was. No one ever came forward to claim him. And inside his pocket, detectives found a tiny scrap of paper with just 2 words written on it. Tamám Shud, a Persian phrase that means, "It is finished." This is the story of the Somerton Man, one of the most haunting and unsolved mysteries in modern history. It was the 1st of December, 1948. The early summer sun was just beginning to rise over Somerton Beach, south of Adelaide. A man taking his morning walk noticed a figure slumped against the seawall, legs stretched out, shoes neatly polished. At first, he thought the man was drunk or sleeping, but when he returned an hour later, the man hadn't moved. Police were called, and soon the beach was cordoned off. The dead man looked to be in his mid-40s, well-built, healthy. He wore a perfectly pressed brown suit, a tie, and polished shoes that were oddly clean for someone found outdoors. There was no sign of violence, no blood, no struggle. In his pockets were a train ticket, a bus ticket, a packet of chewing gum, cigarettes, matches, and a comb. There was no wallet, no identification, and, curiously, all the labels from his clothing had been carefully removed. Whoever this man was, it seemed as though he didn't want to be identified. The autopsy deepened the mystery. The cause of death was unclear. There were no external injuries, but his organs showed signs of congested blood, a clue consistent with poisoning. Yet no trace of poison was found. Experts speculated he had ingested some rare, untraceable toxin. Others thought he might have suffered from a medical condition, but nothing could be proven. The pathologist called it death by unknown cause. He looked perfectly at peace. Yet something about him felt deliberate, as though every detail of his death had been planned. Investigators searched his belongings again. In a hidden pocket sewn inside his trousers, they discovered a small, tightly rolled piece of paper. On it were 2 printed words, Tamám Shud. The phrase was traced to a rare edition of a Persian poetry book called the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám, a collection known for its themes of life, death, and fate. The words Tamám Shud translate to ended or finished, a fitting epitaph for a man whose story seemed to end in silence. But police were not finished. They launched a citywide search for the book from which that fragment had been torn. Weeks later, a man came forward with a strange story. He said he'd parked his car on Jetty Road, not far from the beach, the night before the body was found. When he returned to his vehicle days later, he noticed a small book lying on the back seat. It was a copy of the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám. He hadn't thought much of it until he read the newspaper article about the Somerton Man and the phrase Tamám Shud. When police examined the book, they discovered that a page had indeed been torn out, and it matched the scrap of paper found in the man's pocket perfectly. But that wasn't the only discovery. On the inside cover of the book were a strange set of handwritten letters and symbols, a series of lines that looked like a secret code. The code was indecipherable. 5 lines of random letters grouped in ways that suggested a cipher or encryption. Experts from the military, Navy, and intelligence services were called in to decode it. No one succeeded. To this day, that sequence of letters remains one of the most mysterious ciphers in history. And there was one more clue, a local phone number written faintly on the same page. Police traced it to a young nurse named Jessica Thompson, who lived in a nearby suburb of Glenelg. When detectives visited her home, she appeared shocked when shown a plaster cast of the Somerton man's face. Some said she seemed about to faint. She claimed she didn't know him, but when asked about the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám, she admitted she once owned a copy and had given it to a man she'd known years earlier, a man she couldn't or wouldn't name. Jessica had a young son, and neighbors described him as looking strikingly similar to the dead man. But no connection was ever proven. Jessica never spoke publicly about the case again, and she refused to answer further questions until her death decades later. The police buried the Somerton man in Adelaide's West Terrace Cemetery. His headstone simply reads, "Here lies the unknown man who was found at Somerton Beach, 1st December 1948. But the story didn't end there. Over the years, journalists, detectives, and amateur sleuths continued to investigate. Some believed he was a spy, killed during the early years of the Cold War. Australia, at the time, was a hub of intelligence operations. Could he have been a foreign agent, silenced before completing a mission? Others thought it was a tragic love story, that the man had taken his own life after being rejected by Jessica, the nurse whose phone number linked them. Still others proposed that the code was nothing more than a mnemonic, a personal shorthand for verses in the poetry book. Every theory led to more questions. In 1949, a brown suitcase was found at the Adelaide railway station, left unclaimed around the time of the man's death. Inside were clothes, shaving items, and a stencil brush used by officers to mark cargo. The labels on the clothes had also been removed, except for one name tag, T. Keane. But no missing person named T. Keane matched the description, and investigators suspected the name was fake, possibly a decoy. Everything about the Somerton man seemed designed to erase identity, to hide who he was, where he came from, and why he died. For decades, the case went cold. The man's DNA couldn't be analyzed, and all known records led nowhere. But in the 21st century, technology gave new hope. In 2022, after more than 70 years, a team of forensic genealogists announced that they had finally identified the Somerton man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. Born in 1905, DNA from his remains matched distant relatives in Australia and Europe. But even with a name, the questions remain. Why was he in Adelaide? Why did he have the cryptic note? And what connection did he have to the mysterious nurse, Jessica Thompson? No one can say for certain. Even with modern science, the purpose of his final message, Tamám Shud, it is finished, remains an enigma. The Somerton Man Mystery endures because it touches something deeper than logic. It's a story of identity, secrecy, and the unknowable depths of human life. A man appeared on a beach one day, elegant and calm, carrying no name and no past. And in his pocket, he left a message that the world still cannot fully understand. He died alone, yet his story lives forever, whispered through decades, written into books, studied by thousands who still try to piece together his final hours. Perhaps his death was not a riddle to be solved, but a statement in itself. A man choosing to end his story with the words, "It is finished." And as the waves continue to wash over Somerton Beach, the wind carries the same unanswered question. Who was he, and why did he choose silence as his final act? Some mysteries end with closure. Others, like this one, become eternal. The Somerton man has long since been buried, but the puzzle he left behind still breathes with every generation that discovers it anew. A man with no name, a book of poetry, a code no one can read, and a single phrase that lingers like a whisper in the night. Tamám Shud. It is finished.